My best friend of 40 years forged my signature and tried to take half my ranch. When I confronted him, he just shrugged and said, "Walt, you would have said yes eventually anyway. My name is Walter Callahan. Everyone calls me Walt. I'm 76 years old, and I've run the Circle C Ranch outside Billings, Montana since I was 22. The same year, my father handed me the deed and told me never to let it leave the family. 1,200 acres of grazing land, a herd my wife Dorothy and I built from 11 head to over 300. And 40 years of friendship with a man I trusted more than my own son. Let me tell you how that friendship nearly cost me everything. Dorothy passed 4 years ago. Cancer took her slow, 18 months from diagnosis to the last morning I held her hand in that hospice bed on Grand Avenue. By the end, I was running the ranch alone. My son Daniel, 44, lives in Denver, works in commercial real estate, and calls twice a month, usually about money. My daughter Susan moved to Phoenix years ago, works as a hospital administrator, and calls every Sunday without fail. The one person who never left my side was Pete Sorensen, my foreman since 1985. Pete and I fished the Yellowstone together every June, buried our fathers a year apart at the same cemetery outside town, and served as best man at each other's weddings. When Dorothy died, Pete slept in my bunkhouse for 2 weeks straight so I wouldn't be alone out there on the ranch. He fed my herd, drove me to the funeral home when I couldn't drive myself, and was even godfather to my youngest grandson. So when Pete started handling more of the paperwork last year, I didn't think twice. My eyesight isn't what it used to be, and the fine print on lease agreements and feed invoices had become a headache. Pete offered to take it off my plate. "Let me handle the boring stuff, Walt. You focus on the herd, I'll handle the desk." I was grateful, relieved, and I should have been suspicious. 40 years of trust has a way of turning off the part of your brain that asks questions. The first crack came in March. A survey crew showed up on my north pasture without warning, driving orange stakes into the ground near the old artesian well my grandfather dug by hand in 1961. I walked out there in my robe and boots, furious, asking who authorized them to be on my land. The foreman just handed me a clipboard and told me to take it up with the county. When I called the courthouse that afternoon, the clerk mentioned my parcel had been included in a mineral rights lease filed back in January. I told her that was impossible. I hadn't signed any lease in January or any other month. She read me the filing number anyway, and my signature was right there on the scanned document, in ink that looked almost exactly like mine. I confronted Pete that evening, out by the barn, while he was mending a fence line. He laughed it off, said the county probably mixed up parcel numbers with the Hendricks place next door, and that he'd sort it out first thing in the morning. I wanted so badly to believe him. 40 years of trust doesn't disappear overnight, even when your gut is screaming at you to look closer. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you stopped reading the fine print they put in front of you? 3 weeks later, a man named Roger Ellison from Timberline Energy Partners called my house directly, cheerful as anything, asking when I'd like to schedule the first quarterly payment for the natural gas lease on my north 400 acres. I asked him, carefully, who exactly he'd been dealing with on my behalf. He told me Pete Sorensen, acting under a power of attorney I supposedly signed the previous September, notarized and everything, filed clean with the county clerk. I never signed any power of attorney. I was in Rapid City that entire week for my grandson's baseball tournament. I still had the hotel receipt sitting in a shoebox in my closet. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely dial my daughter Susan's number. She dropped everything, booked the first flight she could get out of Phoenix, and was sitting at my kitchen table by Saturday afternoon. Together we pulled every single document Pete had filed on my behalf over the past 18 months. What we found made me sick to my stomach. The power of attorney had been notarized by a man named Craig Whitmore, a local notary public who, it turned out, was married to Pete's niece. Under that forged authority, Pete hadn't just leased my mineral rights to Timberline. He'd quietly transferred 200 acres of my western pasture into a shell company called Bighorn Range Holdings, using a valuation report from 3 years earlier, back when land prices in the county were well below what they're worth today. He'd been moving pieces of my life into a company he controlled at values far below market, setting himself up to profit from land that had never belonged to him, all hidden behind a Wyoming registered agent and a name that gave nothing away. But here's the part that broke something in me. Pete hadn't done this alone. Buried among the financial records Pete had left behind in the ranch office were copies of 3 wire transfer confirmations tied to Bighorn Range Holdings, totaling $86,000, all routed to the same personal account in Denver, my son's account. Daniel. I called Daniel that night, my voice shaking with a rage I hadn't felt since I was a young man watching my own father get cheated by a cattle buyer decades ago. He didn't even try to deny it at first. There was this long, heavy pause on the line. Then he told me flatly that he'd needed capital for a business venture in Denver that had gone bad. Some commercial property deal that collapsed, and Pete had offered him a way to get his inheritance early. Daniel said the words like, "They were perfectly reasonable. Like stealing from his own father while I was still very much alive, and breathing was simply a matter of moving up a schedule that was coming anyway." I asked him one question, the only one that mattered to me in that moment. "Did your mother know you were capable of this before she died?" He went completely silent on the phone for what felt like an eternity. Then he hung up without another word. I didn't sleep that entire week. I kept replaying 40 years of memories with Pete in my head on a loop, wondering which parts had been real friendship and which parts had simply been him laying groundwork for this moment. The fishing trips on the Yellowstone, the nights in my bunkhouse after Dorothy died, the way he'd hugged me at her funeral and told me he'd always have my back. Had any of it meant what I thought it meant? Or had he simply been waiting patiently for Dorothy to die and my eyesight to fail before he made his move on land his family had never owned an inch of? Susan found me a sharp ranch attorney in Billings named Patricia Nguyen, a woman in her mid-30s who had already handled 2 nearly identical mineral rights disputes in the county that same year alone. She confirmed what those transfer records already showed about Daniel, then filed for an immediate injunction freezing the gas lease and the Western pasture transfer, while a forensic handwriting examiner reviewed the power of attorney line by line. The examiner's report came back within 3 weeks, and it wasn't even close. Pete hadn't just forged my signature, he'd barely tried to match it, betting entirely on the fact that no one who trusted him would ever bother to check. I confronted Pete face-to-face on a Sunday afternoon in late April, out by the same north fence line where the survey crew had first shown up. I asked him straight out, no yelling, just asking. 40 years, Pete. Why? He didn't apologize. Not once, not even a little. He told me, calm as you please, that I was getting slower every year, that my judgment on land value hadn't kept up with the market, and that I'd have signed the lease myself within a season or 2 once I finally understood what the land was really worth. "You weren't losing the ranch, Walt," he said. "You were finally letting it make real money." He said he and Daniel had simply saved everyone the trouble of waiting around for me to catch up. "You would have said yes eventually anyway," he said, like that made it forgivable. Like taking something from a man without asking is the same thing as that man giving it to you freely. I stood there in the pasture Dorothy and I had walked 1,000 times over 38 years of marriage, watching the wind move through grass my grandfather planted, and I felt something in my chest go completely permanently still. Not rage anymore. Just quiet. The lawsuit took 11 months from filing to settlement. Pete lost his position as foreman immediately, and as part of the settlement, he was required to repay every dollar funneled through Bighorn Range Holdings, plus damages and Patricia's legal fees. Craig Whitmore had his notary commission revoked and is currently facing his own separate fraud charges from the state. Patricia told me the evidence against Daniel could be referred to prosecutors if I wanted to pursue it further. I told her I wouldn't be the one pushing for that, though I removed him from my will entirely, every last clause. Susan will inherit the ranch when the time comes, with my 2 grandsons protected in the will as well. Pete moved to Wyoming last spring, somewhere outside Sheridan from what I heard, through a mutual friend at the co-op. That same friend told me Pete tried calling my house twice over the summer. I let both calls go straight to voicemail without listening to either one. Some friendships end with a screaming fight you can walk away from clean. Ours ended in silence, which somehow felt heavier, like a debt that never gets settled either way. Last Thanksgiving, Daniel showed up uninvited, standing at the end of my long gravel driveway in the cold November air, hands in his pockets, asking through the closed truck window if we could just talk for a minute. I looked at him through the kitchen window from inside the house for a long, long moment, watching my own son stand out there like a stranger. Then I closed the curtain and went back to setting the table for 2. I still oversee the Circle C most days, up before sunrise the way I always have, with 2 hired hands now helping where Pete once did. Though Susan flies up from Phoenix every few months to help with the books herself, sitting right there at my kitchen table with her laptop where Pete used to sit with his ledgers. I trust exactly 2 people with my paperwork these days. Myself and Patricia Nguyen, who charges me by the hour, reads every clause out loud before I sign a single thing, and has never once called me Walt, like she's known me my whole life. I've come to prefer it that way. Trust, I've learned at 76, is a line item now, not a feeling. Would you have pushed for criminal charges against your own son, or is losing his inheritance punishment enough? Tell me in the comments below, because some nights I still genuinely don't know if I made the right choice. This story is inspired by real events, with some details changed and fictional elements added for dramatic effect.